And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of Real Talk. It is April 30th, and it's 9:30 in Newfoundland. So that brings us to 4, 5 o'clock somewhere in Ontario, Amanda? 6, 7, something like that. And we're up
Sorry,
at
I can't count.
8. 8. And we're joined by patriots from all across de facto Canada. We've got British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario represented in the panel, and myself here on the East Coast of Newfoundland. We're having a special episode today because the guest is not in the studio. I'm going to be relaying their information. Great information. I think you guys are going to find really useful. And although a lot of it applies to Newfoundland for provincial acts, you're going to find very similar acts in your own province. They'll have the almost identical pieces of legislation. So something like that. With that in mind, we're going to keep our tradition of playing the We Ain't Livin' song written by J.S., living in Ontario right now, a great Canadian patriot. And he's given us permission to use his song as an intro to our live streams here. So without further ado, we're going to clear out the room and share our screen here and have a listen to We Ain't Livin'.
It's been too long since I've seen Mom or a baseball game with Dad. We watch on separate TVs, we're told it ain't safe in the stands. I miss packed clubs and loud bands. I miss giving hugs and shaking hands. Just hold on a little longer, is what they're always saying. Now they're toying with our choices, and that's a game that I ain't playing. You got any questions, please don't ask. Sit down, shut up, and put on your mask. Hell no, 'cause I ain't afraid of dying. That's a bridge that we all cross, and we ain't ever gonna get back all these memories that we've lost. In the end, was it all worth it, or did we make the world stop spinning? No, I ain't afraid of dying. I'm just scared that we ain't living. 2 weeks, a month, a year gone by. Now our whole world's changed. All these rules and regulations are nothing but insane. They took our freedoms and killed them. Is anybody worried about the children? Well, I ain't afraid of dying. That's a bridge that we all cross. But we ain't ever gonna get back all the memories that we've lost. In the end, was it all worth it? Or did we make the world stop spinning? No, I ain't afraid of dying. I'm just scared that we ain't living. Well, if you don't stand for something, you're gonna fall for everything. So take off the blindfold and burn the mask, let's all join hands and sing. I ain't afraid of dying. That's a bridge that we all cross, but we ain't ever gonna get back all the memories that we've lost. In the end, was it all worth it, or did we make the world stop spinning? No, I ain't afraid of dying. I'm just scared that we ain't living. No, I ain't afraid of dying. I'm just scared that we ain't living. So let's start living. And that's what I have to say about that.
All right, let's get our guests back in here. Welcome back, everyone. And before we get going here, as always, we're going to have some quick introductions from our panel. So we'll start below me with Mr. Edward, please.
Well, I'll do the best I can. My voice isn't doing too good right now. I'm Edward of the family Rivers from British Columbia, these Kootenays, basically from Columbia Valley.
Thank you, sir. And to his right there, we have Nikki.
And once again there, Nikki Hurley from Spruce Grove, Alberta.
Short and sweet. Right above him, we've got Amanda.
Hello, hello. Amanda from Toronto, Ontario.
And to her left.
I'm Brian. I'm from a COVID hotspot, Alberta.
And as always, the worst for last, Shane from Newfoundland here in a not a COVID hotspot, certainly not. Hasn't been throughout this whole year. I guess they've got Alberta branded as a hotspot now. I hear Fort Mac is in a state of emergency, and you can imagine what that does to oil prices and that. So anyways, without further ado, guys, real talk. We've had Johnny on the last two episodes. He's given us some pointers and some experience that he's had along the way, some hurdles he's faced, and basically some solutions. And keeping with that theme, because that is what real talk is meant to be about, is to have real people talking about their real problems and ideally presenting their real solutions. A bit of a different one for you this evening. Our guest is not going to be here in the studio with us. So we're going to have the pleasure of discussing the experience as a panel without the person involved. They've relayed the pertinent information to me. I've met, this person is very real, by the way. I've met them several times. They've been in my home. They've met my family, and great patriotic Newfoundlanders. So they've taken it upon themselves to start educating some business owners. Started off that way with what this public health order is, because yes, there's a mask mandate, but as we covered in our last Real Talk episode, there's also a mask exemption in that very same order. And that's important because in the public health order, you can be charged as an offense if you're not withholding or upholding the public health order, the measures within it. So yes, if you're not upholding the mask mandate, of course, that's the obvious. You can be charged with an offense, but the mask exemption is also in there in that same act. So if you are not upholding the mask exemption, you can also be charged with an offense under this act. And that doesn't just apply to the business or the corporation. It applies to the individual making the decision, and that's very clearly worded. So with that in mind, what this person did is they printed off the pertinent sections of the public health order, the mask mandate, the mask exemption, and the offense section. And if you've watched any of our streams before, you would be familiar with the name Carrie Churchill. She went to a grocery store on a live stream because she was refused service there. They wouldn't honor her mask exemption. That was at a Coleman's grocery store. So that was the first place on this person's list, our new guest here. For the sake of a name, we're going to call this person Mary. So that's our guest ghost for this evening is Mary. She took it upon herself to go to Coleman's as one of the stops. And if you've seen Carrie's video, you know that the manager of the store, Chris, was one of the people that eventually approached Carrie and denied her service. Our guest for tonight, Mary, spoke directly with Chris, presented him with the entirety of the information in a very, I might add, a very calm and very professional manner. And that interaction ended with Mary being served, her mask exemption being honored, and being allowed to shop and check out. So that was one. She also said that Chris was extremely polite and helpful. And this is important because approach is everything. And if you approach people in an aggressive manner, they're naturally going to get their back up against the wall. It doesn't have to be about masks. You can think about this in any situation in your personal life. The more aggressive you come at someone, more often than not, they're going to get their back up against the wall. They're going to dig their heels in, and they're going to come back at you. But if you kind of discuss something or propose a question and wait for an answer, that starts a different scenario. And it's not to say that aggression is not merited, and that's not to say that, you know, other mannerisms shouldn't be used as well. This is an all-encompassing battle, but this approach for Mary has been extremely successful so far, and it's only been a couple of days that she's been doing this. So I don't know if anyone on the panel has seen the Carrie video that I'm talking about. Brian hasn't, Edward hasn't, Amanda, I think you may have. You have. Mm-hmm. So at the end, like, the cashier is kind of hesitant, and then the manager, Chris, comes over, and I think we can agree that Carrie was a little aggressive at points, and it probably, and especially just in general with when you have a camera in someone's face, it kind of comes off as aggressive. You know what I mean? Especially when you're saying, I'm live streaming you right now. You know, it's some people can see that as an affront or a confrontation, anyways. But so you saw how Chris was in that video and how he responded and stuff. So to know that this time around, they had a face-to-face discussion inside their store while Mary wasn't wearing a mask, and Chris was extremely polite, extremely helpful, and allowed her to then shop and get her groceries and go about her day. That's quite a turnaround from...
Yeah, I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say...
That's success number one. And from there, it got better. Liquor stores across the province change, so I'm not sure how it works in your province, but here, our Newfoundland Liquor Corporation is fully government run. It's a crown corporation, and that's where all the liquor gets sold. You can still buy beer in other places, but liquor has to be sold in a government approved and run shop. So she visited there, and it took 1.5 hours there, and there was 2 police officers. Now, I don't believe the police were called in any kind of confrontational way. I'm not certain about that. But there was no confrontation in terms of the discussion either way. I'd like to get just go around. We'll start with Brian once I pose this question and kind of go around. But knowing what you know about how your liquor store runs in your province, have you guys ever been into and funny, I'm sorry, Brian, but it just dawned on me as I was asking the question. But Nikki can field the Alberta section of that. But I'm trying to get, have you gone into a liquor store, a government liquor store in your province without a mask on? If you have, how's that gone? Or have you gone in without the mask? Are they honoring it? I think we'll have to start with Nikki on that one if he's got his ears on for Alberta.
I have my, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have my ears on, but to be quite frankly, yeah, since this, as they call it, pandemic started,
Yeah.
I can tell you I haven't been in the liquor store, so I couldn't really speak to that aspect.
Fair enough. I can tell you our liquor stores, I haven't tried. I've gone into our government-run marijuana shops, which are essentially the same thing, and I've had different experiences in different locations, which is strange to me because they're all run by the same people. Amanda, I think you've frequented an LCBO before. You might know where there's an LCBO in your location. How does that work there? Are they honoring mask exemptions at the LCBO?
Yeah, I just got back from the LCBO.
That's our girl.
Yeah.
They do. Apparently they do. And I was told that if somebody comes in without a mask, they literally have to wear a mask and a shield. But now, the one that I was just at, they have, oh God, in between the cash desks, there's it looks like shower curtain liners. That's crazy.
Wild.
But I don't. I wear a mask when I go into stores because I can't be bothered with the hassle. But I take notice if people are wearing or not, and most of these people do wear a mask in there. I've not come across anybody without one, but if they do go without a mask, the cashiers have to put shield and wear a mask. It's ridiculous.
Oh, good Lord.
We're all lepers, man. We're all lepers.
Yeah. Levon just pointed out the liquor stores in Alberta are all independent. I just highlighted that one there. So that would probably change from location to location. Edward, do you have any experience at a BC liquor store out there or anything along those lines, or know anyone maybe who's gone in?
Yeah, well, out here we have a little bit of everything. We have government-run liquor store where you can buy liquor, wine, beer, everything. Then you have the private independents where they sell cold beer and wine. Then you have the small stores that have liquor licenses where they can sell basically any liquor product. Now I've been buying from the small stores because I don't drink that often. I think I've bought 2 bottles in the last year. However, the cold beer store here in Vermeer, BC, I took my brother-in-law there to get liquor one night to get some beer, and that was at the cold beer store, and they immediately tried to kick him out because he wasn't wearing a mask. When he came out to the car, well, I was a little unsettled by that, so I went back into the liquor store with him, also without a mask, and took in a copy of the Health Act and tried to present it to the clerk. And the clerk at first refused to look at it. And I said, well, if you're going to be treating your customers like this, you should at least look at the act. Finally, he just said, well, do your shopping and get out. So that's what we did. We grabbed our beer and went out. Another case was at an actual liquor store. And again, they wanted you to do the whole 9 yards. Social distance, mask, as well as sanitize your hands. Meanwhile, everybody in the store is touching everything. You know,
of course.
Yeah, crazy. That's all I have to say. It seems there's no rhyme or reason to a lot of these regulations.
Well, that's it. So we've highlighted that across the whole country, it's an issue, especially at liquor stores. But you can imagine at government-run liquor stores, all of them are all operated by the provincial government. They have strict rules, and they're following them, right? And they're getting their rules from pretty well the government at this point, and I mean directly, not through a public mandate. Yeah.
Even the ones that aren't government owned, they're still controlled by the government because they have to get a liquor license through the government.
Oh yeah, no, but I mean our provincial government appoints the general managers of each of the locations. Like, you know, they actually staff the stores as well directly. The provincial government does. So it's very intertwined here. And the experience that she had there at that liquor store was fabulous. I was described as a very peaceful interaction with all. There was an RNC sergeant involved, and after speaking to his higher ups, came back in and informed that they would not be removing Mary from the store that day. And they convinced the NLC manager to serve her. They went over how she had just came from Coleman's grocery store and how Chris had provided accommodations once he was kind of properly explained the mandate and the Human Rights Act and the Petty Trespass Act. They had a medical appointment earlier before Coleman's, and the exact same thing happened. At first, they were denied entry. They explained, went through some things. The doctor spoke to whoever he needed to speak to, and they came to an agreement that they could be accommodated. So, especially after relaying this to the RNC as well, and that conversation occurred with the Newfoundland liquor store manager, government appoint, and the RNC, that's a fabulous interaction. Two crown corporations, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, our provincial police, and the Newfoundland Liquor Corporation, the Crown Corporation. Two of those people entities being presented with the laws they're meant to be upholding and having to be explained those in order for, I don't even want to say justice to be served, because that's not the case, but you get my sentiment at least. There was another experience after she left the liquor store. This was a very busy day for this patriot, and this is kind of why I wanted to highlight this, because she doesn't need to be doing this, right? She has a life as well, but she's driven extremely and extremely charismatic along the way. As I've already told you, I've met her, so I've spoken to her face to face. She's met my family, and I would vouch for her to be a representative of somebody who does this more often, because I've seen her approach. I have her information. She's printed off pamphlets for me to take to rallies so that I can pass along this information. She trusts that I can explain it in a way that people can understand it and use it for themselves. And that's the purpose of these series, right? And that's she's doing background work. She's doing it behind the scenes. She's not out in the public eye, but she's getting results like you wouldn't believe. So another one on the way now. So she had a medical appointment, then she went to Coleman's, then she went to the liquor store. And then on the way home, they stopped into a place called Atlantic Trailer and Equipment Limited. This was described as a harder one. There were 3 RNC. RNC is Royal Newfoundland Constabulary. 3 of them attended with the same results. They did agree to provide full services, just like all other customarily available to the public. And they had planned on going to Costco, but as you can imagine, after that day, they decided to end it and head home for the day. And there was also, we have to consider that both locations, one was in St. John's and one was in Mount Pearl. So the RNC, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary that responded, were from 2 different detachments. And at both times, they had sergeants involved that had to go relay information in real time back to their superiors and have information relayed back to them in real time in order to respond and deal with the scenario. So 2 different detachments of Royal Newfoundland Constabulary were also educated along the way. And that is no small feat in one day to provide that sort of education. And keep in mind, this is just, realistically, this is her just trying to go about her day and being prevented at each step and having to provide education. And it's not, COVID isn't real. It's not, this is all a hoax. It's not that. That's not the education we're talking about. And believe me, that education is needed, but that's not the approach we're talking about in any way, shape, or form. This education is strictly using their own rules and essentially against them in a way, but really not against them. It's for us, is what it is. So they have a mask mandate, but they also have a mask exemption. They're in the same piece of legislation. You cannot pick and choose pieces of legislation that you want to uphold. You have to uphold the entirety of it. And if you don't, there's an offenses category in that same act that describes the individual and the business entity / corporation that can be held liable separately. And there's multiple offenses. Your first offense is a smaller fine. Your second offense is a bigger fine. And your third offense is a bigger fine. There's a maximum of 6 months in jail for major offenses in this category. And personal liability. I want to stress that. If you're a cashier at a grocery store and you are the one who refuses service to somebody, yes, your grocery store can be held liable, yes, but you, as the individual, can also be fined. Now, it's not saying you will be. You can be. And if one part of the health order is meant to be upholded, it's all meant to be upholded. And the mask exemption is just as clear as the mask mandate. So there's no excuses on misinterpretation of that. Now, Brian, I never got to hear from you on the last one, but I do have a question for you. You do a fair amount of what I'll say commerce when you're not working, supplies, picking up things that you would need. Do you have any, when you're shopping, if you're going to Kent or Canadian Tire or whatever, what kind of interactions do you have when you're walking into stores? Because you're in Alberta. A lot of us in Newfoundland are spoiled. We have 20 active cases or something, and we don't really know what it's like to be in a place where they're throwing case numbers at you in ridiculous numbers. So what's it like to be out and about in some of these stores?
Well, when it comes to commerce, and say we'll use Canadian Tire as an example, if I'm going into a store, I just use my previous experience and I kind of follow that. When I walk into a store, you'll see signs that say you have to wear a mask. And in the past, I've gone to say there's a security guard or whoever. I said, I can't wear a mask. He said, okay, just don't worry about it. Go in. And I've had that same reaction on multiple occasions. So every time now I see it says you have to wear a mask, I just walk in and ignore it. And then somebody might come in and say, do you have a mask? We have masks if you want a mask. They says, no, I can't wear one. And I just continue on and I kind of ignore them. And then people kind of look at me, and you see a lot of people, they got their mask under their nose and all the other violations of wearing a mask. And it's just, I walk around with a big smile on my face. And it's almost, I think the impression I give is if you want to confront me, you're going to be in for a fight. So they don't confront me. And I usually go about my business, walk in, and don't have very many confrontations at all. It's been my experience. That's what I do. I just walk in, ignore everything. The few little things that people say you can't wear a mask. And that's about the end of it.
Have you been denied service anywhere?
Yeah. I was at a dollar store. No, it was a Goodwill store. Went into the Goodwill and they said, you have to wear a mask, you have to wear a mask, you have to wear a mask. I said, no, you don't. And then I said, okay, that's fine. I'll just take my business somewhere else. I went to a different Goodwill store and got in. And it's just like, it's our policy, Goodwill, and they say this is their policy, but every individual store has a different policy. It's all up to the people at the till. Now, I wish I had the information that this anonymous person, who you said, what were you using as a name?
Mary,
that if you go in there and you can attack it the way she did with the act or whatever it is, and you can do that professionally like that, that's a far better way to do it than the way I'm doing it. But I just walk in and I just total disregard for everything that's in my way, and I just say no.
That's an important strategy, though. I don't want that to get underrated either, because yes, we're talking about Mary's approach and how it certainly has merit, but to a certain degree, you just kind of have to be able to be like, nope, and just kind of walk away. Like at a grocery store, if you're walking into a Walmart and their Walmart greeter is stood there in their little plexiglass sandcastle that they've built for their greeters now. I don't know if they have them your way, but even here in Newfoundland, we have a big, basically like a pillow fort or a blanket fort, but it's plexiglass, and that's where the greeter stands. So they can't even get to you anymore. They just kind of have to shout something at you.
For 20 cases?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly. You just kind of like, you can acknowledge them, but you never stop. Because if you stop, you're now engaged, right? You can acknowledge that you've been spoken to while you're still walking, because you have a clear, unobstructed path. You continue walking, and you kind of just, no, thank you, I can't wear one, and you just go on, grab your cart, and keep going. You don't have to stop with a printed out mask mandate to educate every single person. Some people need to be ignored as well, right? But if that person then takes it upon themselves to call the manager out to the front store and be like, hey, a super spreader just went out into the sports section and they don't have a mask on. And then the manager comes down and starts saying, you got to wear a mask or get out of here. That's when the education starts. And that's where the confrontation has to dial back. So you ignored and kind of maybe disrespected the person at the front desk, right? That's fine. But once the manager comes to you now you're engaged in that conversation. And this is where you get more ease with honey than vinegar? Yes, I got it. Right. So right off the bat, when that manager comes to you and you look at that person and say, like, I'm not putting a mask on, get out of here. He or she's just going to be like, well, I'm going to call security and you're out of here. Right. But if you just take the person aside, maybe if you're in an aisle and there's other customers, maybe if you just say, hey, do you want to just step over here and just chat with me? Because you're blocking the aisle, show some respect and say, people are not going to want to walk by me with my, step over here, we'll have a little chat. And you just kind of, it's flies with honey. I knew I screwed it up. I said bees. Oh, thank you. In the comment section there, you get more flies with honey. So yeah, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. It's not bees. Bees already have the honey, but flies come around looking for, it is. I'll get it right. By the time this Real Talk series is completed, I'll have that saying right. I swear to you guys. But yeah, so same thing happened at Canadian Tire in St. John's as well as Carbonair. The Canadian Tire is a problem. You kind of ignore the sign and whatever. The manager kind of gets upset with you. You mostly ignore them and just keep shopping and stuff. You can get away with the bigger store places too. They generally, and this is unfortunate, especially in a place small like Newfoundland, but it's unfortunate anywhere. The local small shops are the ones enforcing these regulations far more strictly. And they're probably more afraid of liability and yada, yada, yada. Like, I get that. And that's where education comes in. Because these business owners have to know that they might be liable for not enforcing the mask mandate, but they might also be liable for not upholding your mask exemption because they are part of the same order. It's the exact same education run. So our Mary is certainly not done her work, and I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to be doing an update on some of her adventures throughout some St. John's area locations. The thing about, again, with Canadian Tire, it depends on who's on duty. And I had the same thing. I've never been denied at Canadian Tire, but I've had some less than amicable experiences, we'll say. I've had the manager follow me 6 feet, of course, behind me, throughout the entirety of my trip. And of course, because I am who I am, my trip ended up taking a lot longer because I noticed what they were doing. So a trip for nails and a hammer turned into a half an hour of browsing a lot of different aisles just for the hell of it. But when I got up to the counter, the funny thing is, like, they then followed me right up till checkout and watched me followed me out the door. Right. So it's like, is that about safety at this point, or is that about shaming and about like control? Because you're not stopping me from endangering everybody. You're allowing me to continue about my day, but you're just going to follow and hover over me at 6 feet just so that I know that I'm being shamed. Go ahead, Amanda.
So I work retail, right? And sometimes it is about the control and the power. Because I will admit, in the beginning of all this stuff and like the whole masks and stuff, I was like, yes, I can actually tell a customer to get out if they're not wearing a mask. I was that person until I learned about like mask mandates and how it's not the law. It's a mandate. So yeah, a lot of it is about like power tripping. And customers need to learn their rights and go after those businesses and show them like you can't do that. I'm so glad I changed because I don't want to be served no notice.
Exactly. And that's a good reaction to have. Go ahead, Edward. Yeah. I think you're trying to say something there.
Okay, yeah, I think it's both of those as well as harassment. I think some of these people get off on the idea that they can harass you and get away with it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and that's the kind of the control, the narcissism. It's weird, but you place people on a pedestal, right? You've put people up on this high horse where they're above these anti-maskers who are super spreaders, and if you're above somebody morally, then you can be justified in treating them less than you would anybody else, right? It's a classic conquer and divide and conquer. It's the same black, white, conservative, liberal, left, right, Christian, Jew, Muslim, the whole 9 yards. It's a classic divide and conquer, and that's one of the reasons why I really, really like Mary's approach. It's not something that I have naturally within me. I've had a lot of people tell me they think I'm a really calm, collected person because they only know me from these streams, and that gives me a really big chuckle, right? But like I'm not as composed when my rights are affronted, right? If I'm just trying to buy a carton of milk because I have a baby at home that needs milk, and you're trying to prevent me from doing that because I haven't put a piece of cloth on my face, I find it hard to stay composed sometimes in those scenarios. Now you have to refrain, and you can't just say what's exactly on your mind, because you'll have to go live in a log cabin in the woods if you do, at least if you're like me. So this approach that Mary has is something that I think we can all learn something from. Even the most seasoned of us can learn from. And I'm looking forward to a couple more. I got in the comments here, harassment is actually covered in our Human Rights Act in Newfoundland, section 17 or 19. And each one of your provinces, Canada has a Human Rights Act, and then each one of your provinces has one as well. So look for that in your province. That's something to add to the information that you're presenting, because you have a public health order that your premier, who then appointed a chief medical officer, right? That's where these mandates and all this nonsense is coming from. You have a premier who appointed a family physician to be a top doctor in your province. And then these mandates come from there. They make a public health order or an emergency public health act or something of that nature. And that's where your mask mandates come from. You might also have them in your cities under your municipal, but provincial is where you want to look, because that has the top jurisdiction. Find your find your public health order and find your mask mandate, and then look for a mask exemption. And find it. It'll be there in wording. It has to be word for word. They have to grant you that exemption. They cannot force every single person into this. They have to allow for certain exemptions. And then find out what happens if you don't follow that act, that public health act. And that's basically the angle that Mary has taken. There's a public health act. It says we have to wear masks. It says there are exemptions here. And here's what happens if you don't follow this act. Those are the three pieces of information you need from there. And then from that point on, you want to look at your provincial Human Rights Act. Discrimination, right? So if you're being denied service because you're being medically discriminated against, that's also a breach of your human rights. Provincially, you'll have a Human Rights Act that covers that. This is all very pertinent information to have. And Mary has pamphlets printed out, foldable, ready to go, that can be folded perfectly into an educational packet, is all I can call it. And so on May the 1st, there's a Canada-wide rally in different cities along the way. St. John's has one at Confederation Building, so all of our Antifa trolls can show up and post my videos and call me an alt-right fascist and all that kind of stuff. And then May 15th, we'll be back at the same location, because we make it easy for them so that they don't have to bugger off around the city trying to find us. Confederation Building's a fabulous spot. We get a lot of foot traffic, or car traffic, sorry. But we're also trying to bring attention to the fact that our politicians aren't in that building, because a lot of our population doesn't know that. A lot of them think that our politicians have been back to work because we don't really have any COVID here. So a lot of them seem to think that we have working politicians, and that really isn't the case. I think they sit sometimes at a reduced capacity, and they've got all their desks moved 6 feet apart and all that kind of stuff. But they're not always there. They're not at max capacity, and they're not working the way they're meant to. And I think more people in Newfoundland needs to know that. Just getting a couple of really good comments in here too that I might have to highlight on the screen. We're going to be getting updates from Mary as she goes to some more places. And as a little, this one has to be highlighted. Thank you very much, Wayne. Comment of the night there. Jason Kenney is an imbecile. If anybody wants to insert Doug Ford's name in there, I'll highlight their comment as well. Or your local premier anywhere, I'll be glad to put that up on the screen. Just as another little teaser, Brian, we're going to have you on an episode of Real Talk coming up soon. I hope in the next maybe couple of days. I think you've had some experiences that we'd like to hear about as well.
Yeah, I've had some experience that I wouldn't mind sharing with everybody.
So that's something to look forward to. We also have Johnny's going to be coming back, I believe. And updating us on some other of his battles as well. Nikki, do you have anyone in your personal life that has any stories they might want to tell us on an episode of Real Talk there?
You talking to me?
I was, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do believe we'll have one individual that may have some pertinent information that people can just change the wording and may be able to work within let's say the school system, for example.
Exactly. We got some. I know we've got patriots all across Canada, but I know here in Newfoundland we've got some people dealing with some nonsense in the education system. Is the only way I can put it. And when we teased this series, we said we're going to be using information not only from our website but from other patriot groups as well. And I named Christopher James, A Warrior Calls, as one of those. Notices of liability and documents like that are very helpful in scenarios like this. It's not just about an application to your Supreme Court for an offense against the Public Health Act. That is the route to go. But sending notices of liability to people, demonstrating where they're liable, how liable they are, and what you're willing to do going forward if it's not rectified, that can be quite powerful if done properly. And Christopher James at Warrior Calls covers that very extensively. We've had patriots successfully use documents from his website in order to rectify some wrongs, we'll say, in their personal lives. So we've got some upcoming episodes here in Real Talk that I think is going to be kind of interesting. I'm really looking forward to. We're going to go ahead and get some final thoughts. And I'll keep it going with below me here. We'll start with Nikki. Wrap us up with your final thoughts before we say goodbye to everyone here.
Well, just to wrap it up and to keep it short here, share the research. Want everyone to come together here and fix these problems. And on that, my final note is get educated to get liberated.
Thank you, Nikki. Edward, do you want to offer us any final words of wisdom there?
I'd just like to say that everything we've said here so far is pertinent. But I have a question for everyone in the panel and everyone watching. What I'm going to show you is a binder with papers, including the health orders here in BC, notices, all sorts of different stuff that basically, at times at one point or time or another, I needed in a confrontation either with police, business people, mayors, a variety of people in the collective establishment, let's say. My question is, where does it stop? We keep trying to find ways to be free. Something we shouldn't search for, shouldn't need to search for. And we keep gathering and gathering and sharing and promoting and promoting. But a lot of this stuff, like when you get to court, it's thrown out. Everything you've done, everything I've done, everything we are doing was for naught. Just a question for everyone. Where does it stop?
That's a darn good question, Ed. Where does it stop? I've had that same kind of question. I was asking my family that 6 months ago about the masks. Okay, we're going to start wearing masks now. When does it stop? At what point? What's your threshold of when, And months later, I've still not gotten an answer on that.
The thing is, people don't even realize that now we are like Nazi Germany. We cannot travel from one point of the country to the other to visit or be with our families without being stopped and sent back. Sometimes sent back 1,000 miles. You'll be almost like, there's one gentleman was entering Quebec, and the Quebec police are trying to send him all the way back to British Columbia rather than allow him to go forward either into Quebec or Prince Edward Island. It's craziness.
That is, and I know people get scared and say it's hyperbolic to make that comparison to Nazi Germany, right? Because that's a very overused metaphor that people like to say, right? But when you consider that you have a passport that says on the very front page, on that insert, Nikki told you in our last episode, read what it says. Every patriot should know what it says on the inside of that passport. And for that to be the case, and then for you to be stopped and asked for papers along your travel in this country is an utter disgrace. So some people say it's hyperbolic. I understand why they make that claim, because it's a stretch. I understand that, but you've got to start analyzing what's happening critically. And Nikki's showing you the inside of that passport there. That's something every Canadian should read and shake their head hard after they finish what's on that front page, given the current climate here now. So, Amanda, what about you? Any final thoughts for you, Amanda?
Well, it stops with us. We have to learn how to be confident and say no. It's hard sometimes, but you just got to learn to say no. Just say no.
We were taught that as kids.
Yeah, I know.
Say no to experimental drugs. My mother told me to. My mother taught me to never take experimental needle drugs, and I'm glad I listened to my mother. I won't be doing that. Brian, how about?
There's a subject of human rights come up, and I had a little experience. I went down to the Alberta Human Rights Commission, and my first thought was Alberta Incorporated. Their arms are kind of tied to what the government wants. So I went down there, and I've done a little bit of studying, and they are supposed to be there to discuss anything that I want about human rights. That is what they're supposed to be there for. But I went in there and I had a few questions, and they're all like a bunch of legal beagles. They're in there for lawsuits and stuff. And if I don't have a case, they really don't want to talk to me at all. And there was a receptionist there. And I went in and I just said, I just got a few questions about this and that. And then she kind of says, oh, well, it's like this and that and that. And then, but you never know because there's new legislation. And my eyes must have peaked up because she stopped talking. Legislation is infringing on my rights? Is that what you're saying? And then she stopped talking immediately after she said that. And I was just like, so then they sent out an agent to talk to me, and she really didn't want to talk to me at all. Like, and that was all fine and dandy because it was kind of what I expected. But so there was that experience with the Alberta Human Rights Commission was far less than what I had hoped for, but kind of what I expected. And with Ed Rivers talking about the justice system, and you do all this work, you bring it to a court and it all gets thrown out. I've been saying for many, many, many years, the justice system needs to be put on trial. And I think we all agree with that.
100%. I think so. Well, the justice system is a commerce system. And once you know that, you know it's not justice, and you don't expect to seek justice from that point on. Brian, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit in our next episode because I got some things you peaked on the human rights there, and it's going to touch gravely on the subject or the main subject of your talk with myself and Nikki there in the next episode. So I'm excited to get on that one. I just want to offer a bit of a final thought. It's been a common theme throughout the comments that I've been reading here in the comment section. Just say no, stand your ground, own the ground that you stand on. I've got a friend, Stone Lee, who likes to say you own the 4 square feet around you, I think it is, or something along those lines. But that comes with responsibility. Because far too often people think that freedom just means we don't have to live by your rules. That's not what freedom means at all. Freedom is about responsibility for your actions and how they are affecting other people as well. So that's kind of why I stressed how I liked Mary's approach, because you can go in guns ablaze into a store with a live stream and scream and shout about your Charter of Rights and the whole 9 yards, right? And God bless you if you do that, because that is needed. We do need people offering that kind of mentality back towards some of the nonsense. But at the same time, you shouldn't expect to get any real positive results from that. And in order to actually change people's frame of mind, when have you ever changed your mind because somebody called you stupid? You don't. But if somebody actually offers you a piece of information that goes against what you believe, but you know to be true, you may have changed your mind in the past. But never in the history of any time has anyone said, you're stupid, and then that person has said, oh, you're right, I should just change my mind. I guess I'm stupid, you know? So that's why Mary's approach. What's that, sorry, Ed?
Stupid is what stupid does.
Yeah, exactly. So as I'm going to wrap up here now, because we're getting to the hour mark, and I can feel Nikki's about to call me on my private bat line to tell me to wrap it up here, I'm going to offer a joke to the crowd, because again, my panel has neglected to take me up on any offers for jokes.
I almost did.
You know, Amanda, I've been learning the guitar lately, and my wife, I've only learned one song because I'm not very good, and my wife asked me, she said, can you stop playing Wonderwall, please? It's driving me nuts. Stop playing Wonderwall. Do you know what I said to her? I said, maybe. And Brian, Why are elevator jokes so good and so classic?
Oh God, I don't know.
It's because they work on so many levels.
Oh jeez.
I do very much thank my panel, Brian, Amanda, Nikki, and Edward, for joining me, keeping me company, offering your insights and your experience. I hope you guys do join. Audience, whether you've been watching us live throughout here or whether you're watching one of our re-uploads on YouTube, thank you for watching. Thank you for paying attention. We have Learning Centers, episodes 1 through 7. And this has been the final of episode 3 for Real Talk on April 30th. As always, you stay sovereign, people.